My daughter-in-law screamed that I was a freeloader who needed to pay rent or get out. I'm George Wilson, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd earned some basic respect. For 3 years, I'd quietly endured Jennifer's comments about my retirement lifestyle. She saw an unemployed burden living in her house, surviving on Social Security. She had no idea I'd been building something extraordinary, a $1.4 million portfolio, while she counted every dollar I supposedly cost them. What started as a family meeting about my financial contributions ended with revelations that shocked our entire community. You see, while Jennifer calculated my worth based on grocery receipts and utility bills, I was systematically growing wealth through long-term investments in blue-chip stocks and ETF funds, something she never bothered to ask about during those quiet morning hours when she assumed I was just watching TV. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you how a woman who thought she held all the power learned that quiet wealth runs deeper than loud demands. The disrespect didn't start overnight. It built slowly like water wearing down stone. 3 years ago, when my wife Margaret passed after her 12-year battle with Alzheimer's, I thought moving in with my son Daniel and his wife Jennifer would be temporary. Just until I figured out my next steps. I was grieving, exhausted. I'd spent over a decade as Margaret's full-time caregiver, and honestly, I didn't know who I was without that responsibility. Jennifer seemed understanding at first. "Take all the time you need, Pop," she'd say. But I started noticing the little comments, the eye rolls when I'd sit in my leather recliner reading the Wall Street Journal, the way she'd change the subject when I mentioned anything about finances or investments. The first real sign came about 6 months after I moved in. I overheard her talking to her friend Sarah on the phone. "Supporting elderly in-laws is so expensive," she said, not knowing I was in the kitchen. "George doesn't work, obviously lives on Social Security. It's like having a teenager who never moves out." I felt my face flush, but I said nothing. Maybe she was just stressed. The second sign was more deliberate. During family discussions about money, Jake's baseball equipment, vacation plans, home repairs, Jennifer would literally turn her back to me. When I'd offer input, she'd dismiss it with, "Pop, this is about real money, adult money, real money." As if my $1,847 monthly Social Security check was play money. As if the 12 years I'd spent managing Margaret's medical care, insurance claims, and medication schedules while she forgot how to speak had somehow erased my brain. What Jennifer didn't know was that those 12 years weren't lost time. They were preparation time. While she saw me reading financial newspapers as an old man's hobby, I was actually studying market patterns. While she assumed my quiet morning hours meant depression or laziness, I was analyzing stock movements and building strategies. You see, when you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's, you learn patience. You learn to observe without reacting. You learn to plan for the long term because every day brings new challenges. Those skills, they translate remarkably well to investing. But Jennifer never asked about my background, never wondered why I always seemed calm during financial discussions, or why Jake would come to me with questions about his allowance and savings accounts. She just saw what she wanted to see, a burden. The pattern became clear over those 3 years. Anytime I'd mention an article I'd read about market trends, she'd interrupt with something about real-world concerns. When I'd offer to help with financial planning, she'd pat my arm like I was a confused child. "That's sweet, Pop, but Daniel and I handle the grown-up stuff." Grown-up stuff. I'd been managing complex financial decisions since before she was born, but because I wasn't bringing home a weekly paycheck, my experience meant nothing. The breaking point was building. I could feel it in every dismissive comment, every excluded conversation, every time she'd explained to others how difficult it was to support me. But I kept quiet. I watched. I planned. Because here's what I learned during Margaret's illness. Sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the greatest advantage. They stop paying attention to what you're actually doing. And what I was doing during those quiet morning hours while Jennifer assumed I was wasting time. I was building something that would make her $85,000 marketing salary look like lunch money. But she was about to push me too far. And when that happened, the whole community would learn exactly what real money looks like. By spring of 2024, the tension in our house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jennifer's demands were escalating, and I realized I was facing a choice that would define the rest of my life. If I stayed silent and just accepted her treatment, I'd lose everything that mattered to me. First, my relationship with Jake. My 16-year-old grandson was the light of my life. If I stayed silent and just accepted her treatment, I'd lose everything that mattered to me. First, my relationship with Jake. My 16-year-old grandson was the light of my life. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd sit with me after school, and I'd teach him about compound interest, market fundamentals, and the power of long-term thinking. "Grandpa," he'd say, "you make this stuff sound so easy. Mrs. Patterson's economics class is boring." But when you explain it, it actually makes sense. Jennifer had started making comments about those tutoring sessions. "Pop, don't fill his head with fantasies about getting rich quick. Jake needs to focus on realistic goals." She was already planning to limit my access to him. I could see it coming. If she followed through on her nursing home threats, I'd be isolated from Jake during the most important years of his development. Those Tuesday and Thursday sessions would end. The college preparation I'd been helping him with would stop. Worse, he'd grow up thinking his grandfather was just a burden who got shuffled off when he became inconvenient. Second, my self-respect. I'd spent 43 years in financial services before taking early retirement to care for Margaret. I'd helped dozens of families build wealth, navigate market crashes, and secure their futures. To be dismissed as some clueless old man living on handouts, that cut deeper than Jennifer realized. But the biggest stake was Jake's future itself. See, Jennifer had no idea what I'd been building during my retirement. She assumed my careful budgeting meant poverty. She thought my simple lifestyle meant I had no resources. What she didn't know was that every dollar I wasn't spending on myself was being invested for Jake's future. The average cost of a 4-year college education was approaching $200,000. Jennifer and Daniel were saving, but at their current rate, they'd cover maybe half of that. Their plan involved Jake taking massive student loans, which would saddle him with debt for decades. I had a different plan. During Margaret's illness, I'd learned to live on very little. My needs were simple: basic food, simple clothes, a warm place to sleep. Everything else went into investments. While Jennifer saw frugality, I saw opportunity. For 8 years, I had been building Jake's education fund through careful day trading and long-term investments. The math was working beautifully. Compound growth, dividend reinvestment, strategic market positioning. All the skills I'd developed over 4 decades in finance were paying off. But if Jennifer forced me into a nursing home, I'd lose the ability to manage those investments actively. End of the month. That's 3 weeks. After Jennifer left the kitchen, Jake turned to me with worried eyes. "Grandpa, $800 is almost half your Social Security check." "It is." "That's not fair. You took care of Grandma for 12 years. You gave up your job to help family. Life isn't always fair." "Buddy, but you're not unemployed. You know more about money than anyone I know." I squeezed his shoulder. "Some people only see what they want to see." "Are you going to pay it?" I looked at this kid I loved more than my own life. Smart, curious, worried about his grandfather's dignity. He deserved better than watching his family tear itself apart over money. "Jake, sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. Whatever happens, you remember that I love you." "Okay, Grandpa. You're scaring me." "Don't be scared. Everything's going to work out exactly as it should." But inside, I was calculating. Jennifer had just drawn a line in the sand. She wanted to treat me like a tenant. Fine, but tenants have